vice versa. Some of the lyrics that I hear the men singing, I wonder how many of y'all would be happy to marry the guy who's singing along to that stuff and is proudly proclaiming treating women terribly. Maybe the worst curse, or perhaps the best blessing you could possibly have in life at some point will be a daughter. And you'll learn something that you could not have learned. That's stupid, that's not true. You could have learned it some other way. I was going to say you're going to learn something.
Yeah. Yeah, it keeps us going.
Imagination does that. So there's a few things that are interesting. There's a lot going on here. I'm going to ask anyway. I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. Anybody look this guy up? What'd you learn about him? Anything?
Well, it talked about how he altered the rape of the mind, and then how he analyzes the brainwashing techniques and thought control and learning states. So I was like, so what is going on here? What is he trying to get here? Like, is this just like a regular statement that we should think about, or is he actually trying to get us to get our minds to think a different way? Because he was a brainwashing technique, and I was like, but this doesn't even seem like a quote that's gonna brainwash you. But again, we haven't gone into real detail about it. So how are we gonna know?
Good. So it's not saying, what's that? It is incredibly smart, because if you understand who Joost Meerloo is, if you understand what he did, and he wrote a book called Rape of the Mind that specifically was about brainwashing techniques, which we're going to read in this class, by the way. I think in March or April, we're going to read one chapter from that book. He was a guy who, it says here, Dutch American. He worked for the Dutch resistance against the Nazis during World War II. His job specifically was to teach spies, when you get caught, not if you get caught, but when you get caught, because you will get caught, here's how you are able to resist their brainwashing techniques. Here's how you can resist their torture, specifically, in his case. And he explained it because everybody is going to break during torture at some point. Nobody is able to maintain it. And then he goes on to talk about the techniques used for brainwashing during the Korean War. I'm actually reading another book right now by somebody else who talks about the brainwashing techniques used by the Chinese state in the late 60s. So it's an interesting, it's of great interest, because if you see, based off of this, where does he think that brainwashing happens? At what level? When you're young? No.
Subconscious.
Yeah, right there. He says it right there. Yeah, in your mind's when? Someone just said it. Subconscious. It happens when you're unconscious. Yeah, it happens to your unconscious mind. These are the things that go into your mind when you're not guarded against them, when you're not prepared to defend against them. If I sit down and say, all right guys, listen, I'm going to teach you guys the meaning of life, and you don't want to hear it, your mind is on guard to fight against it, to defend against it. But instead, if I just say a few things, and I make you, especially if I can make you laugh in the process, some things will kind of start to go into your unconscious mind. You can tell me if this sounds familiar to you at all. Your mind is essentially broken up into these three categories. Well, we'll be concerned here with the first two. The part that's conscious, the stuff that you actually are aware of. And you've got this thing down here called the personal unconscious. Stuff that is filtered in, the stuff that doesn't make it up here ends up in here. So every experience that you ever have, every thought you ever have, is still maintained in your brain. It's in your mind. Not your brain, your mind. The stuff that you're aware of goes here. And you've got this thing called the ego that decides which information goes here and which information goes down there. I hope this sounds familiar to you guys.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So now, whatever doesn't end up here in the area of consciousness ends up down here. Now, going back to what Chris was saying earlier about music, you can be listening to something and not even realize that you've been listening to music. So now the question becomes, since everything that you experience is processed, what is it that's going down here? Because remember, these two things together, especially this thing here, is what influences your behavior. Why do you do the things that you do? Why do you have anger management issues, as we say? You're just an angry person. Why? I don't know, it's just the way I am. No, there's a reason for it. Something has gone on that's caused you to be this way, or at least led you to be this way. And as as Jung says, until we make the unconscious conscious, we're going to do what we've always done, and then we're going to call it fate. That's just the way I am. I don't know, just, oh man, what do I do? I'm going to go on Instagram. That's what I do. If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. That's just how I am. These are the things that influence your behavior. So whoever figures out which way to go on these two things is going to lead it. So now, start figuring out what kind of things get shuffled into your unconscious. Now, we like to say, nothing. I'm on guard against it. Even music that you don't realize you're listening to. Even like, anybody, I don't know if anybody here goes to sleep listening to something. Not white noise. Yeah. What do you go to sleep listening to?
Anything? Music.
Some music related, yeah. I wonder if anybody goes to sleep listening to like radio or podcasts or things like that. And the idea that all of those things, they end up in your unconscious. You're not aware of them. So whatever happens when you're asleep, it's still going into you. It's still being processed. You just don't realize it. And then that's the stuff that causes you to behave the ways in which we behave. That's why this work of trying to bring the unconscious into the conscious is so important. Because it's going to determine your behavior. You may find yourself doing things in life that you're asking yourself, God, why would I have done that? It doesn't make any sense at all why I would have done that. It makes sense if you make it conscious. Now you know why you would have done it. But I guess the goal is, I was going to say more importantly, now you know how not to do it in the future. I guess the goal would be to get up there as soon as possible so that you don't do it in the present either. So that you know why you are the way that you are, so that you don't do those kinds of things, even in the first place. But of course, the only way that you really know that there's something down there is because you find yourself behaving in a way that you wouldn't have predicted. That's how you know something's down there. And it's like I remember if it was in this class, we talked about black holes. And you look out into space, how do you know there's a black hole there? The whole idea is that it's a black hole. You can't see it. Well, what you do is you can see the effects that it has on space around it. You can't see the thing itself, but you can see time-space being warped. You can see the accretion disk. And then you look and go, so there's a black hole there. I can't see the thing itself, but I can see the effects of it. If you come in here and you're like, and I'm going to ask you, are you sick? How'd you guess? Did I see little germs walking across you? No, I just saw the effects of it. And so you know that there's something down here because you see the effects of it. You can't necessarily see it. And so oftentimes we won't go looking for something until we know that there is something to look for. And that's why it's important to analyze ourselves. Because if we want to be better than what we are, there's a few things. First off, we can. It's actually possible to be better than what we are. Are we going to fuck up? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I can write a book. I can write a book about that. But unfortunately, everybody in here is going to be able to write a book about that within a decade or so, if you can't already. What Jung is trying to do with what we've been talking about the past couple of days is to save you from that. And so now, tying this into Meerloo, that there's this constant noise which captures our minds in society and culture. It's music, it's art, it's conversations around us. Excuse me. You ever go to a coffee shop and just listen to the conversations? You ever go to a classroom when the teacher says, "All right, off you go," and you're working, and listen to the conversations? My goodness, somebody has some weird conversations, man. There's a certain section of this classroom that had some weird ass conversations last semester, man. If you know who you are, you know who you are. It had some weird ass conversations, always entertaining. But my guy sat there and just said, my goodness, what's lingering there in the unconscious is leading to behavior that affects us. It's not an evil thing. It's not an evil thing at all, because you want to be able to. I hope some of you some of you have like little nieces and nephews and brothers, sisters, cousins. This might already be happening to you, but at some point you want to be able to like just open up your head and dump it into somebody else's and just say, examine yourself. Here's how you do it, because you don't want people to make the same mistakes, or actually, you don't want people to make worse mistakes. I hope some of you guys make the mistakes I made, because they're a lot of fun. But there are other ones, man, that I'm sure you know people that you really would rather spare them from. Those things. In fact, there are probably mistakes that you've already made that you'd want to spare people from as well. But a lot of that comes from deep introspection. And when you realize that so much of what happens in our behavior is introduced to us through the unconscious, now you get a window opening up how it is that people are brainwashed. And the brainwashing doesn't just have to be something hyper nefarious, like we're going to reprogram you, which is what Meerloo does talk about, by the way. He's talking specifically in his book about totalitarian regimes. And by the way, if anybody wants a copy of his book, just let me know. I can send you a PDF, a free PDF copy of it. But what he's also talking about here is just how things just kind of end up in our heads. Maybe an artist doesn't even necessarily mean to be a bad influence. They're just making music that they know will be popular, sounds like it's fun. And then you can fast forward and you can see that if people adopt what this song is saying, how horrible it would be for them. I don't know, I just sit here and all love when I say this, man. I know some of you will be affected by this, but I hope if it doesn't make sense now, it will make sense to you at some point. Some of y'all who are pumping your fist to a wop, I wonder if you'd do that if you had children. I wonder how many of you would be proud if your moms were doing that. I wonder how many of you guys would look forward to marrying that girl. And then vice versa. Some of the lyrics that I hear the men singing. I wonder how many of y'all would be happy to marry the guy who's singing along to that stuff. And is proudly proclaiming treating women terribly. Maybe the worst curse, or perhaps the best blessing you could possibly have in life, at some point will be a daughter. And you'll learn something that you could not have learned. That's stupid, that's not true. You could have learned it some other way. I was going to say you're going to learn something that you couldn't have learned any other way, but you could have learned it some other way, which is by analyzing yourself. By just taking a minute to realize the implications of the things that we take into our bodies. If you sit here and you eat donut holes all day, every day, what are you going to look like?
The donut hole.
God damn you. I was going to say you look like this because that's what I mostly eat. No, you would, but moreover, what would you look like inside? Diabetes, what's that? What? Dirty. Dirty on the inside, yeah. Dead on the inside, eventually, yeah. You're sluggish, you're slow, nothing works properly. Why do we think it's any different from the things that we take into our minds? You take in healthy things into your body, you get a healthy body. You take healthy things into your mind, you get a healthy mind. It doesn't matter if it's conscious or if it's unconscious. But if we're taking ugly, you're going to get ugly out of it. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Wednesday.